The bustling noise of the airport echoed all around, a chaotic symphony of announcements, hurried footsteps, and rolling suitcases. Among the crowd, Darius Turner, a 16-year-old black teenager with dreams as big as the sky he was about to fly through, stood anxiously in the check-in line. His backpack, old and worn but meticulously organized, held more than just clothes and school documents. It held his aspirations. Today was the day he would board a plane to Chicago for the International STEM Innovation Competition, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that could change everything for him and his mother. Darius had spent months preparing for this moment. His team's sustainable energy prototype wasn't just a project. It was a labor of love, representing late nights of brainstorming, setbacks, and triumphs. It was his ticket to proving his potential and earning a scholarship that could lift his family out of their financial struggles. As he clutched his itinerary and ID, his mother's voice echoed in his mind. Asterisk, you've worked hard for this, Darius. Show them what you're capable of. Asterisk, those words had carried him through every moment of doubt. The line inched forward, and Darius finally reached the check-in counter. Behind the desk stood a woman named Miss Robbins. Her expression was as crisp as her perfectly ironed uniform, her sharp features unyielding as she glanced at him. Darius greeted her politely, sliding his documents across the counter. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm flying to Chicago for a school competition." Miss Robbins scanned his papers, her lips pressing into a thin line. Her gaze flicked from the screen to him, scrutinizing his faded sneakers and patched-up backpack. Something about her demeanor made Darius's stomach churn with unease. She paused, her fingers hesitating over the keyboard, before uttering words that struck him like a thunderclap. "There's an issue with your ticket." Darius blinked in confusion. "I confirmed it last night," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "It should be fine." Miss Robbins let out a sigh, her tone dripping with condescension. "Do you even have the means to pay for a ticket like this?" she asked, her voice loud enough to draw the attention of nearby travelers. A man in the next line glanced over, muttering something under his breath. Darius felt a heat rise to his face, a mix of embarrassment and anger, as he clutched the strap of his backpack tighter. "I didn't buy the ticket. My school did," Darius stammered, his words almost pleading. He could feel the weight of judgment in the stares around him, the pity and skepticism cutting through him like knives. Miss Robbins raised an eyebrow, her disbelief evident. "Must be a mistake," she said curtly. "Step aside while I sort this out." Darius obeyed, stepping away from the counter and standing to the side. The bustling energy of the airport seemed to blur around him as his mind raced. The flight was boarding soon. What if he missed it? Should he call his teacher, his mother? But she was at work, and he couldn't bear the thought of burdening her. He had worked so hard for this moment, and now it was slipping through his fingers. The minutes dragged on, and Darius felt as though he was shrinking under the weight of the situation. Nearby, travelers murmured among themselves, some stealing glances at him. Every second felt like an eternity, his dreams dangling precariously on the edge of ruin. Then, cutting through the haze of his despair, a calm, authoritative voice broke through. "Excuse me, what seems to be the problem here?" Darius turned to see a woman striding toward the counter with purpose. She was tall and impeccably dressed, her navy blazer bearing an airline insignia. Her name badge read Evelyn Grant, Executive Operations Manager. Her presence was commanding, her gaze sharp but fair. Miss Robbins visibly stiffened, her confident demeanor faltering. "It's nothing serious, Miss Grant," Miss Robbins began, her tone defensive. "Just a misunderstanding." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, and she glanced toward Darius, her expression softening when she saw the young man standing there, his shoulders slumped under the weight of humiliation. "A misunderstanding?" she repeated, her tone razor-sharp. "Let me see his ticket." Miss Robbins hesitated but handed over the documents. Evelyn examined them with a practiced eye, her brow furrowing slightly. After a moment, she looked up at Darius, her voice firm but kind. "Your ticket is perfectly valid." Darius's heart leaped, a mix of relief and disbelief washing over him. "It is?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn nodded, her gaze steady. "It is." Then, turning back to Miss Robbins, her voice hardened. "You'll explain to me later why this young man was treated so poorly." Miss Robbins flushed, her face turning an uncomfortable shade of red, but she said nothing. "Come with me," Evelyn said to Darius, her tone softening once again. "Let's get you to your gate." For the first time in what felt like hours, Darius felt a sliver of hope. He followed Evelyn through the airport, her presence a shield against the judgmental stares of the travelers around them. As they passed through security, Evelyn glanced at him and smiled. "Chicago, huh? What's waiting for you there?" Darius straightened his shoulders, his pride returning. "A STEM competition," he said, his voice gaining confidence. "My team built a prototype for a sustainable energy generator." Evelyn's smile widened. "Impressive," she said. "You must be proud." "I am," Darius admitted. "It's taken a lot to get here." Evelyn nodded. "Then let's make sure you get there." As they approached the gate, Darius's heart began to race again, not with fear, but with anticipation. Yet, just as relief began to settle in, Evelyn stopped suddenly, her expression unreadable. She turned to the gate agent, spoke a few quiet words, and then glanced back at Darius. "Wait here," she said, her tone leaving no room for questions. Then, with the same commanding stride, she walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Darius stood there, his mind swirling with questions. What was happening? Why had she left? And most importantly, would he make it onto that plane? The uncertainty loomed over him, the minutes stretching endlessly, as he waited for Evelyn to return with an answer that could either make or break his future. Darius stood near the gate, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, his eyes darting around the terminal. The buzz of the airport seemed louder now, each announcement and hurried step blending into a cacophony of sound that made it hard to focus. He clutched the straps of his backpack tightly, his palms damp with sweat. Evelyn's sudden departure had left him in limbo, and the uncertainty was gnawing at his already frayed nerves. He replayed the events in his mind, trying to make sense of it all. Why had Miss Robbins treated him that way? What did she see when she looked at him? A kid who didn't belong? Darius wasn't naive. He knew people sometimes judged him before he even said a word. It wasn't the first time, but this felt different. This was supposed to be his moment, his chance to shine. Instead, he'd been made to feel like an outsider, as though his dreams weren't valid. He glanced at the gate agent, who was busy checking boarding passes and directing passengers. The line of travelers moved smoothly, their faces a mix of excitement and impatience. Darius's gaze lingered on the families and professionals, all with somewhere important to be. He wondered if any of them had noticed what had happened at the check-in counter, if they had seen him standing there, his confidence unraveling under Miss Robbins's scrutiny. Did they care? Did they even realize how much this flight meant to him? Darius's thoughts drifted to his mother. She'd worked tirelessly to support him, often pulling double shifts at the diner just to make ends meet. She didn't complain, though. She believed in him, always encouraging him to aim higher. "You got a gift, Darius," she would say, her tired eyes lighting up with pride. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. It was her belief in him that had kept him going, even when things felt impossible. The competition in Chicago wasn't just about winning. It was about proving that all their sacrifices had been worth it. If his team's sustainable energy prototype caught the attention of the judges, it could open doors to scholarships and opportunities he'd only dared to dream of. But now, standing here with no clear path forward, those dreams felt fragile, like they could shatter with one wrong move. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Darius checked the clock on his phone. The flight was set to board soon, and Evelyn still hadn't returned. A sense of dread crept in, tightening his chest. What if something had gone wrong? What if he missed the plane? He shook his head, trying to push the negative thoughts away. Evelyn had been confident, almost reassuring. She wouldn't have walked away if she didn't have a plan. Right? As the minutes ticked by, Darius noticed a man standing a few feet away, watching him. The man was tall and well-dressed, his sharp suit and polished shoes suggesting he wasn't your average traveler. There was something about his presence that felt deliberate, almost too intentional. Darius avoided making eye contact, but he could feel the man's gaze lingering. The man finally stepped closer, his voice smooth and calm. "You all right, young man?" he asked, his tone friendly but probing. Darius hesitated. He wasn't sure how much to say or if this stranger could be trusted. "I'm fine," he replied, keeping his answer short. The man nodded, as though he didn't quite believe him. "Traveling alone?" he pressed. Darius's grip on his backpack tightened. "Just waiting for someone," he said, his voice steady but guarded. The man studied him for a moment before offering a polite smile. "Well, good luck," he said, stepping away and blending back into the crowd. Darius exhaled, realizing he'd been holding his breath. The interaction left him feeling uneasy, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. He scanned the terminal again, searching for any sign of Evelyn. His mind was a swirl of worry and doubt. Maybe he should call his teacher after all, but what if that made things worse? He didn't want anyone to think he couldn't handle this on his own. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Evelyn reappeared. She was walking quickly, her face unreadable, holding a small envelope in her hand. Darius's heart jumped at the sight of her, relief mingling with curiosity. "Sorry to keep you waiting," she said, her voice calm but firm. She handed him the envelope. "This should take care of everything." Darius opened it hesitantly. Inside was a new boarding pass, and his eyes widened when he saw the seat assignment, first class. "First class?" he asked, disbelief coloring his tone. Evelyn smiled, her expression softening. "Consider it an apology for what happened earlier," she said. "You deserve better than the way you were treated." Darius stared at the boarding pass, unsure of what to say. Gratitude swelled in his chest, but so did a lingering sense of confusion. Why had Evelyn gone to such lengths for him? She didn't owe him anything, yet she'd stepped in when no one else had. "Thank you," he said finally, his voice sincere. Evelyn nodded. "You're welcome. Now let's get you on that plane." As they approached the gate, Darius felt a mix of emotions, relief, gratitude, and a renewed sense of determination. But beneath it all, there was still a flicker of unease, a question that gnawed at him. Why had Miss Robbins targeted him in the first place? And why had Evelyn taken such a personal interest in helping him? He stepped onto the plane, the first-class cabin feeling surreal as he settled into his plush seat. Passengers around him chatted quietly, oblivious to the turmoil he'd just experienced. Darius tried to relax, but his mind wouldn't let go of the day's events. As the plane taxied down the runway and lifted into the sky, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a story far bigger than he'd anticipated. As the plane soared into the clouds, Darius stared out the window, his mind churning with a mix of emotions. The events at the airport replayed in his head like a broken record. He couldn't stop thinking about the look on Miss Robbins's face, the judgment, the disbelief. No matter how much he tried to brush it off, it lingered, digging into him like a splinter he couldn't pull out. The first-class seat fell out of place beneath him. Plush, spacious, and entirely unlike anything he was used to. It should have felt like a victory, a moment to enjoy after all the stress he'd been through, but instead, it felt strange. He wondered what the other passengers around him thought. Did they assume he belonged here? Or were they silently questioning, like Miss Robbins had, how someone like him had ended up in a seat like this? Darius shifted uncomfortably and tried to focus on the small screen in front of him, but even the movie playing felt distant, unable to drown out his thoughts. A flight attendant passed by, smiling warmly as she offered him a drink. He thanked her politely, taking the glass of orange juice and sipping it slowly. Her kindness helped ease his nerves, but only slightly. He couldn't help but notice how different her demeanor was from Miss Robbins's. Was it just luck that he'd encountered someone kind this time? Or was it because Evelyn Grant had intervened? Evelyn. Her name kept coming back to him. The way she'd stepped in without hesitation, her calm authority, and the ease with which she'd handled the situation. It wasn't just her position that had made the difference. It was her willingness to see him, really see him, when no one else did. But why? Why had she cared so much about a random teenager's travel plans? Darius couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her actions than she'd let on. As the flight continued, Darius's thoughts turned to the competition waiting for him in Chicago. He imagined standing before the judges with his team, presenting their prototype. Maya and Jordan had been texting him all morning, their excitement barely contained. They were counting on him to be there, to stand beside them and show the world what they'd built together. Darius clenched his fists, determination flaring in his chest. He wouldn't let anything, or anyone, get in the way of that. But even as he resolved to focus on the future, a nagging feeling pulled at him. Something about the encounter at the airport didn't add up. Miss Robbins's hostility had felt too personal, too targeted. Darius thought about the man who'd approached him near the gate, his questions casual but oddly pointed. Was it just a coincidence, or had there been something else at play? The plane landed smoothly in Chicago, the city's sprawling skyline coming into view as they descended. Darius grabbed his backpack and stepped off the plane, the chill of the terminal air a sharp contrast to the warmth of the first-class cabin. As he walked through the terminal, his phone buzzed with a message from Maya. "Where are you? We're already at the hotel. Can't wait to practice one more time before tomorrow. Text me when you're here." Darius smiled at the message, her enthusiasm infectious. He typed out a quick reply, letting her know he'd just landed and would head to the hotel soon. But as he slipped his phone back into his pocket, a familiar voice called out behind him. "Darius." He turned, surprised to see Evelyn Grant walking toward him. She wasn't supposed to be here. Her work was at the airport, wasn't it? Yet here she was, her navy blazer replaced with a more casual coat, her expression as composed as ever. "I thought you'd be on your way by now," Darius said, his confusion evident. Evelyn smiled faintly, but there was something serious in her eyes. "I wanted to make sure you got here safely," she said. "And I need to talk to you about something." Darius frowned, his curiosity piqued. "What's going on?" Evelyn glanced around, as if checking to see if anyone was listening. "Not here," she said. "Let's find somewhere quieter." The unease that had been simmering beneath the surface all day flared up again as Darius followed her through the terminal. They ended up in a small coffee shop tucked into a corner, away from the main crowds. Evelyn ordered tea for herself and motioned for Darius to grab something, but he shook his head. He was too tense to think about food or drink. Once they were seated, Evelyn leaned forward, her hands folded on the table. "I owe you an explanation," she began, her voice low but steady. "What happened at the airport wasn't just a mistake." Darius blinked, his pulse quickening. "What do you mean?" Evelyn hesitated, as though weighing her words carefully. "There's more going on behind the scenes than you realize," she said. "I don't know all the details yet, but I do know this: you were targeted." The word hung in the air between them, heavy and unspoken. Targeted. It felt both shocking and unsurprising at the same time. Darius had felt the weight of judgment before, but hearing it confirmed like this made his stomach twist. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn's expression softened, and for the first time, she looked almost vulnerable. "I wish I knew," she admitted, "but I promise you, I'm going to find out. In the meantime, I need you to focus on your competition. Don't let this distract you." Darius nodded slowly, his mind racing. Part of him wanted to press for more answers, but he could see that Evelyn was holding something back. Whatever it wasn't something she was ready to share. Not yet. As they left the coffee shop, Evelyn placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've got something special, Darius," she said. "Don't let anyone take that from you." Her words stayed with him as he made his way to the hotel. The city lights blurred past the taxi window, their glow reflecting the whirlwind of thoughts swirling in his head. He didn't know who or why, but someone had tried to stop him. And as much as he wanted to focus on the competition, he couldn't ignore the feeling that this was far from over. The lobby of the hotel buzzed with energy as Darius stepped through the glass doors. Fellow competitors from around the country were scattered throughout, some lounging on the plush couches, others checking in with excitement etched across their faces. The sight reminded Darius why he was here. He was part of something bigger, a chance to prove himself and his team. Still, Evelyn's words echoed in his mind. Asterisk, you were targeted, asterisk. At the check-in counter, the clerk greeted him warmly and handed over his room key. Darius mumbled a quick thanks, eager to settle in and prepare for the big day. But as he turned toward the elevators, he couldn't shake the sensation that someone was watching him. He glanced over his shoulder but saw only groups of competitors laughing and chatting. Shaking his head, he tried to push the paranoia aside and made his way to his room. Inside, the quiet felt almost jarring after the chaos of the day. Darius set his backpack down carefully on the bed, pulling out his laptop and prototype notes. He had hours of work to do, but his focus wavered. He picked up his phone and saw a new text from Jordan. "Where you at, man? We're in the lobby. Come hang." Darius hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. He wanted to join them, to feel the comfort of his friend's familiar energy, but something held him back. Instead, he replied, "Just got in. Gonna catch up on some stuff. See you tomorrow." The lie felt heavy, but he wasn't ready to explain the day's events, not yet. As the hours passed, Darius worked through his notes, tweaking their presentation slides and rehearsing his key points. The prototype they'd built, a compact, affordable, sustainable energy generator, had been his dream project. It wasn't just about science. It was about solving real-world problems, giving people in underserved communities access to clean energy. This was his chance to show the judges and the world what was possible. But no matter how much he tried to focus, his mind kept wandering back to Evelyn's warning. Who would go out of their way to interfere with him? What did they gain from it? The question circled endlessly, and with every lap, his unease grew. Later that evening, as Darius lay in bed, the room dark except for the soft glow of his phone screen, he received another text. This one wasn't from his teammates. "Be careful. Not everyone wants you to win." The message was anonymous, no name or number attached. Darius stared at the screen, his heart pounding in his chest. He read the words again and again, trying to make sense of them. Was this a threat? A warning? Who had sent it? And how did they even get his number? He sat up, his thoughts spiraling. Grabbing his laptop, he searched through emails and messages, trying to find anything unusual. He even checked the competition's participant list, looking for clues, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Frustrated and no closer to answers, Darius tossed his phone onto the bed and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The next morning, the tension in the air was palpable as the competition began. The large conference hall was packed with teams setting up their booths, their prototypes displayed proudly. Judges roamed the room, jotting down notes and engaging with participants. Darius and his team worked quickly, arranging their display and running through last-minute checks. Maya and Jordan were buzzing with excitement, but Darius's nerves were on edge. "Everything okay, D?" Maya asked, noticing his silence. "Yeah," Darius said, forcing a smile. "Just a lot on my mind." "You'll crush it," Jordan said confidently, clapping him on the shoulder. "We all will." Their optimism was contagious, and for a moment, Darius allowed himself to believe it. As the judges approached their booth, he took a deep breath and launched into their presentation. He spoke with passion, explaining the science behind their prototype and its potential impact. Maya and Jordan chimed in seamlessly, their teamwork evident. The judges nodded, asked thoughtful questions, and left with smiles that felt promising. But as the day wore on, Darius couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. Every time he glanced over his shoulder, he caught glimpses of the same man from the airport, the tall, well-dressed stranger. He was standing near another team's booth, pretending to examine their work, but his eyes kept drifting toward Darius. Darius's pulse quickened. Why was this man here? What did he want? He didn't have time to dwell on it, though, because the final round of judging was about to begin. The top 3 teams would be announced, followed by a presentation in front of the entire room. As the announcements began, Darius felt his stomach churn. The first team was called, then the second. Finally, the announcer said, "And our third finalist, Team Horizon." Cheers erupted around them as Maya and Jordan hugged Darius, their excitement contagious. For a moment, the stress melted away, replaced by pride and relief. They'd made it. But as they prepared to take the stage, Darius's phone buzzed again. This time, the message was more direct. "You should have stayed home." Darius froze, the words sinking in like a lead weight. He scanned the room, his eyes searching for the man. He spotted him near the back, his expression unreadable. Darius's hands tightened into fists. He wasn't going to let this stop him. Whoever this man was, whatever his intentions, Darius refused to back down. Taking a deep breath, he joined his teammates on stage, ready to face whatever came next. As Darius stepped onto the stage with Maya and Jordan, the bright lights overhead made it impossible to see the audience clearly. Yet he could feel their eyes on him, hundreds of people waiting to hear what he had to say. His teammates stood tall beside him, their confidence radiating, but Darius's mind kept flickering back to the text on his phone. Asterisk, you should have stayed home, asterisk. The words had a weight to them, a dark promise that sent chills down his spine. Jordan tapped his arm, pulling him back to the moment. You ready? He asked, his voice low but steady. Yeah, Darius said, forcing himself to focus. Let's do this. The presentation began, and the room fell silent as Darius introduced their prototype. He spoke clearly, his voice carrying over the crowd as he described their vision for sustainable energy solutions. Maya and Jordan followed seamlessly, explaining the technical aspects and real-world applications. The audience seemed captivated, and for a brief moment, Darius felt a spark of hope. Maybe they could pull this off. But just as he was wrapping up, a commotion erupted near the back of the room. People turned in their seats, murmuring as the noise grew louder. Darius squinted into the lights, trying to make sense of what was happening. Then he saw him, the man from the airport. He was standing now, gesturing angrily towards someone in the aisle. Security had appeared, and their hushed conversation quickly escalated into something more heated. Keep going, Maya whispered urgently, nudging Darius. He hesitated but nodded, continuing with the final points of their presentation. Yet the tension in the room was palpable, and it was clear that the audience's attention was divided. As they finished, the judges offered polite applause, but the distraction had taken some of the energy out of the moment. The team exited the stage, and Darius couldn't help but glance back toward the commotion. The man was gone, escorted out by security, but the unease he left behind was still there, gnawing at the edges of Darius's mind. Backstage, Maya and Jordan were buzzing with excitement, analyzing their performance and speculating about their chances. Darius tried to join in, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through his messages again, hoping for some kind of clarity. That's when he noticed something he hadn't seen before, a small attachment on the last text. He opened it, and his stomach dropped. It was a photo, taken from behind, of him and his teammates standing at their booth earlier in the day. The timestamp matched the moment when he felt those eyes on him. Whoever had sent the message hadn't just been watching him. They'd been following him closely enough to capture that image without him noticing. Everything okay? Maya asked, her voice cutting through his thoughts. Darius hesitated. Should he tell them? Would it even help? He didn't want to scare them or throw them off before the results were announced. Forcing a smile, he said, Yeah, just checking something. Maya didn't look convinced, but before she could press further, the announcer's voice boomed through the speakers, calling everyone back into the main hall. It was time to reveal the winner. The tension in the room was electric as the teams gathered on stage, their nerves visible in every jittery movement and hushed whisper. The announcer held a golden envelope in his hand, drawing out the moment with theatrical flair. And the winner of this year's International STEM Innovation Competition is... The pause felt endless. Darius's heart pounded in his chest, his thoughts a whirlwind of excitement and dread. Team Horizon. The room erupted into cheers, and for a split second, Darius forgot everything else. He and his teammates hugged tightly, their disbelief and joy spilling over. This was it, the moment they'd worked so hard for. But as they stepped forward to accept their trophy, Darius caught a glimpse of something that made his blood run cold. Standing near the exit, just barely visible in the shadowy hallway, was the man from before. He wasn't alone this time. Beside him was another figure, taller, dressed sharply in a dark suit. They weren't clapping or cheering. They were watching, waiting. Darius forced himself to smile for the cameras, holding the trophy with his team as the crowd applauded. But inside, he knew this wasn't over. Whatever was happening, whoever these people were, they weren't going to stop now. And as much as he wanted to revel in the victory, the unease in his chest told him that the real challenge was still ahead. As the applause died down, Darius and his teammates stepped off the stage, still riding the high of their victory. The trophy felt heavier than it looked in Darius's hands, a tangible reminder of how far they'd come. But even as Maya and Jordan celebrated beside him, Darius couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. The shadowy figures from earlier lingered in his mind. He tried to convince himself that he was overthinking it, that this moment was theirs to enjoy, but the unease gnawed at him like an unwelcome guest. "Let's get back to the booth," Jordan suggested. "Maybe we'll catch some media attention while the buzz is still fresh." "Good idea," Maya agreed, already pulling out her phone to record a celebratory video. Darius nodded, forcing a smile. They headed back toward their booth, where a small crowd had already gathered to congratulate them. Reporters with cameras and microphones swooped in, asking about their project and their plans for the future. Darius answered as best he could, leaning on the polished responses he practiced in his head. But as he scanned the room, he spotted something, or rather, someone, that made him freeze. Evelyn Grant was standing near the entrance, speaking animatedly with a man in a crisp suit. It wasn't the same man from the airport, but there was something about him that set off alarm bells in Darius's mind. Before he could process it, Evelyn turned and made her way toward them. Her heels clicking sharply against the floor, she smiled warmly, but her eyes held a hint of urgency. "Congratulations, Team Horizon," she said, her voice calm but firm. "You've made an incredible impression today. Darius, may I speak with you for a moment?" His teammates exchanged curious glances but nodded, stepping aside to give them space. Evelyn led Darius a few steps away, her expression shifting the moment they were out of earshot. "You're in danger," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the crowd. Darius's stomach dropped. "What do you mean? Who's after me?" "There's no time to explain everything," Evelyn said, glancing around as if expecting someone to appear at any moment. "But the people following you, let's just say they don't want to see someone like you succeed. They've been targeting you since the airport, trying to intimidate you into quitting." "Why?" Darius asked, his voice a mix of confusion and anger. "What do they gain from this?" Evelyn hesitated, then leaned in closer. "Your prototype isn't just a science project. It's a threat to powerful industries. Your design could disrupt entire markets, and not everyone wants that. They see you as a risk, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to stop you." Darius felt a chill run down his spine. He'd known their work was important, but he hadn't realized just how much it threatened the status quo. "What do I do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Stick close to your team," Evelyn said, "and whatever you do, don't go anywhere alone. I'll handle the rest." Before Darius could respond, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Darius Turner." They turned to see the man in the dark suit approaching, his expression cold and unreadable. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze locked on Darius. "I need a word," the man said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Evelyn stepped in front of Darius, her posture firm. "He's under my protection," she said. The man's lips curled into a faint, almost mocking smile. "I'm not here to cause trouble. Just a friendly chat." Darius's heart raced as the man pulled out a sleek business card and handed it to him. The logo on it was unfamiliar, but the words beneath it sent a shiver through him. Energy Futures Initiative. "I represent an organization that's very interested in your work," the man said smoothly. "We'd like to offer you an opportunity, one that could change your life." Darius glanced at Evelyn, whose expression remained guarded. He looked back at the man. "I'm not interested in anything that compromises my vision," he said firmly. The man's smile faltered for a split second before returning. "Think it over. You'll find we can be very persuasive." As he turned and walked away, Darius felt a mixture of fear and resolve settle over him. This wasn't just about winning a competition anymore. It was about standing up for what he believed in, no matter the cost. Later that evening, As the team packed up their booth, Evelyn approached Darius one last time. "You handled that well," she said. "But this isn't over. Keep building, keep pushing forward, and remember, you're not alone." Darius nodded, her words igniting a fire within him. He didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but he knew one thing for certain: he wasn't backing down. As they left the conference hall, the city lights stretching out before them, Darius felt a renewed sense of purpose. The fight wasn't just for his dream, it was for everyone who believed in a better future, and no shadowy figure, no anonymous text, would take that away from him. But as they walked away, a figure watched from the shadows, a phone pressed to his ear. "He's not giving up," the voice said. "Then we'll have to make sure he learns the cost of defiance."